Today, we're stepping up to the plate with none other than World Series champion and Major League Baseball icon, Nick Swisher. Nick is known for his energy, his passion for the game, and that signature Swisher smile. But behind the highlights and home runs is a story that isn't told nearly enough. In this episode, we dive into the reality of concussions in professional baseball. From foul tips to full speed collisions, the risks are real, and the long term impact, even more serious than Nick realized. You'll hear Nick open up about the toll of a high impact career, the mindset of an athlete pushing through pain, and why now, as a husband and girl dad, he's an advocate for prioritizing brain health. This is a conversation every athlete, coach, and sports fan needs to hear. So get ready, because Nick Swisher is keeping it all the way real. Let's get into it.
Well, full disclosure, I'm a former athlete and sports fan, and I'm actually from Cleveland, Ohio. So,
Oh, okay. OH, let's go.
yes. So, love seeing that when I was looking into you. And of course, I love your wife and her work as well.
Thank you.
What I do is I'm a medical speech language pathologist. I own a private practice, and I'm licensed in 9 states. I see clients all over the country, and I do international work for like accent modification and whatnot. But in February of this year, I was invited to do a talk. I do public speaking and whatnot. And so I was invited to do a talk on concussion, traumatic brain injury, and CTE in athletes and the role of the SLP. And I gave this 90-minute talk, and I'm speaking to my colleagues. So I'm going through the information and I'm thinking, because you all know this information. And no, I had a line that was just shocking afterwards. And a lot of my colleagues were saying, oh my gosh, I think my husband may be showing signs, or I think my son or my daughter is having some difficulty in school, and this could be why. And so it just really got me thinking, like, if my colleagues are shocked at this information, what are the chances that my neighbor knows? What are the chances that athletes know, coaches, teachers? And so I was just really on this kick to really be the change that I wanted to see. And I know that speech therapists don't have a seat at the table in the athletic space. And with the professional athletes that I speak with, everybody is saying, why would we talk to an SLP about anything? And so we specialize in neurological and neurodegenerative conditions. And so when athletes experience a ding or anything that can alter their brain function, the big thing that's always told by doctors is stay in the dark, get off your devices. In a couple of days, you'll return to play. Everything's fine. And unfortunately, that is can be more detrimental, because with a head injury, you have primary and secondary. And so with primary, you're instantly getting that reaction. Secondary, that can start showing signs hours, days, weeks afterwards. And if you've done your quick protocol, what's the president, what's your mother's maiden name, get back out there, and you pass, then a lot
How many fingers am I holding up?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So those quick tests that are easy to pass, unfortunately, lead to more issues. And my goal is really to raise awareness about that, just so that athletes are aware that, when they cheat protocols or make pacts with each other, because I'm learning that there are a lot of things that happen amongst players and teams, and even parents who believe and know that they're doing good things for their kids. But I want to raise awareness so that athletes and parents know, if therapy and they think, kiddos, they think about lisps, and if someone says wabbit instead of rabbit, or stuttering, which are things that we are qualified to do. But we also have an entire niche on this medical side where we work with patients who have dementia, stroke, Parkinson's disease. Now I'm seeing a huge uptick in long COVID brain fog in my practice. And so I dedicate my time, my business, my money, everything into learning more and being an expert in this. And to know that there are athletes who are like, having a difficult time with memory, or having a hard time with finding words, or having just black spots throughout their day, and not really having an answer, but the lack of knowledge or awareness is evident that, this is what was going on. I also wish that I would tell teachers. They have a great baseline, because if they're seeing, instead of saying like you're slacking or you're getting lazy, maybe consider something else, but they need that knowledge to even get to that point. So I'm writing a book. I started a nonprofit called Brain Talk Foundation. And the book is called The 25,000 Mark. It's not just a concussion. And that is an homage to Dr. Bennett Amalu, who discovered CTE. And he described Mike Webster. You're familiar with all of
Sure.
that? Okay,
Sure.
good. So Dr. Amalu said that Mike had the equivalent of suffering 25,000 car accidents over his 25-year career. And so the goal is to just have that shocking number and get people to listen. It's a very
Right.
touchy subject. So there's a balance with all of this. And so having someone like you to be able to just share your experience is, I think, going to be able to help a lot of people.
Sure. I think one of the biggest things that I've heard you just talk about right there is you're giving information. And I think that's kind of the best thing that you can do for a young athlete, a seasoned athlete, like all of that. It's unfortunate for us, but my mother-in-law passed from dementia, obviously not from dementia, but really struggled with all that. For my father, played in the big leagues for 10 years. That was before concussions were a major thing. He had a fall as well when he was with the Philadelphia Phillies a while back, had a grand mal seizure. So there's a lot of different brain injuries that I have maybe not dealt with personally myself, just from maybe the one or two documented concussions that I've had. But I think one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of the things that maybe might cause that later dementia in life, or not taking advantage of the information that you have and getting on it and taking care of. When you break a bone, you don't just continue to keep playing. When you break a bone, you have to get into a cast and you have to be there for 6 weeks, just like the doc tells you. That's one of the things as an athlete is you're just like, oh, it's a concussion. Oh, it just feels like a bad headache. No big deal. Just get me back in there, because obviously with football players, you don't play, you don't make any money. And so even on the baseball front, we're very fortunate that at least our contracts are guaranteed. But I think that was one of the things that I'm noticing, at least now. I'm about to turn 44 years old. One of the things that I focus a lot, I've really kind of turned into somewhat of a biohacker kind of after my career ended. Just checking my hormone levels, making sure all of my markers are right where they need to be. Because if they're not, there's techniques and there's medicine out there that can help you get to where you need to be. And so for someone like me, like I take full advantage of all that stuff. There's so much information that's out there. Like you said, this is a very touchy subject for athletes, because get ourselves back to where we belong. Because at the end of the day, like baseball players are a lot different than football players. We're not banging our heads up against each other. But I just saw a player got hit in the head with a 100-mile-an-hour fastball the other day. That sort of stuff is that's scary. You want to talk about car wrecks to your brain? That sort of stuff is absolutely just like so terrifying to me. So being able to come up with, maybe it's the technology of getting better helmets, just like they do in football each and every year, but trying to take these sort of these sort of things we don't know enough about and putting them at the forefront. And I think you're starting to see that, at least over the last handful of years with athletes, whether they're like, wow, I just feel like I'm depressed, or like a lot of different emotions go into sort of that stuff. And obviously I'm preaching to the choir, because that, but now it seems like it's kind of coming to the forefront, which is great, because there are people like you that are willing to give their lives and their money and everything that they have to try and come up with solutions. And hey, for someone like me, we're blessed to have somebody like you, because obviously I'm not that smart. I need somebody like you to actually tell me, or to let me know exactly where we need to go with this, or how we need to combat these issues. And maybe they need to be something different when an athlete or just a normal human being is younger in life. Maybe if they fall off the like a fence or something like that and land on their head. It might be different for somebody that's 6, 7, 8 years old than it might be for me when I ran into the wall in Oakland when I was 25 and just absolutely just everything blacked out.
Yeah.
So maybe different, and I'm sure you could tell me all that stuff, but that's one of the things that I think that we can do a way better job as athletes is utilize the information we're giving, because people like yourselves are spending so many hours on this that it shouldn't be just pushed to the side. It should be found a way to bring into athletes' lives and to give them more information, because like I tell my young athletes that I work with now, the more you know about yourself, the better you're going to be as an athlete. You're going to know how to handle situations so much better. So Dr. Kelly, what you're doing right now is absolutely fantastic. I love all that stuff. I think there's always a way you can get better. There's so many different things that you can do as an athlete. And for people like you to be able to give us that information, we need to start paying attention a little more.
Yeah, I love your enthusiasm, and you are, I will say, rare because in my experience with speaking with professional athletes, not everybody takes advantage of, what you discussed with the biomarkers and checking. Like, I think that's fantastic. And I love that you are sharing that with the athletes that are coming up behind you that you get to.
I feel like you have to. You always learn from people that are better than you and are smarter than you and are more educated than you. And I feel like for myself, maybe I didn't do as much of that when I was younger. But obviously now I've got 2 daughters of my own, and I'm trying to be the best role model I can be for them. So if I need to learn about what they're going through, then I need to read, or I need to, I need to just to learn and to educate myself. And that's where all this brain, the brain function and all this new brain stuff that's coming out, it's still not being paid attention to as much as we need it to. We're not trying to take athletes off the field.
No.
We're to give them a better life moving forward. Yes. And not having to deal with all these bad things that could happen. Now that's the problem. It's the woulda, coulda, shoulda. Like, there are things that can happen, and there are things that do happen because of these brain injuries. And like you're saying, even like just with the overall understanding of what CTE is or how that comes about. I mean, 25,000 car crashes. That's just like, I don't want to be in one.
I know.
25,000. So it just goes to show you how amazing the human brain is and how we need to take care of it. But I think that's that knowledge and that understanding of, we know what happens when the crash takes place or the actual incident takes place. What I think that we need to do a better job of is realizing how we can make it better. Okay, we're not going to take the concussions out of life. That's just is what it is. What there's a rattle in the brain, that just happens. But what can we do as a whole and as a human to make sure that whatever trauma we did to the brain during that sort of incident, or whatever you want to call it, make sure that it doesn't come back, or make sure it doesn't leave that lasting bruise. Like when you bang your arm up against something, you get a bruise, and it's there for a couple of weeks, but then it goes away. And that's where it's kind of like, okay, is the brain as resilient as that? Or is it like, hey, how do we kind of realize what we need to do to get ourselves to where it can be like that, where it can bounce back, little Wolverine action,
Absolutely.
I mean, no one likes to be ripped off the field at all. No athlete. They all want to be on there. But at the end of the day, if you don't properly take care of yourself, you're never going to be on that field again.
That's right.
And I think that's one of those things where it's like, whoa, that if that doesn't pop out, if people hearing this, if that sort of stuff doesn't pop out to them, they're missing the boat. Like it seems like it's right there. It seems like it's right there. It's like for myself, I'm just thinking about my daughters now. I mean, it's really coming into play. My oldest daughter is a jumper. She's an equestrian. She's a horse rider.
Oh.
And my youngest daughter is a flyer on the cheerleading team. So I'm like, you want to talk about brain injuries? I mean, like that. That's where I'm like,
things that I have done.
I know.
And I cheered, so I am aware.
So I'm just like, we try and do our best to, take all the necessary precautions. But once again, I mean, like if there are, falls or anything that happens where, these sort of things start to present themselves, obviously this information you're giving me today, I feel very blessed that you're giving me this, like, because I'm like, wow, I felt like I knew a little bit about head injuries and the whole nine just from being an athlete and, hearing all the meetings and all this, all the people that I've talked to throughout the years, but really like having your own daughter and kind of, making sure that you can help them as best as possible, because I'm praying to God I'm not banging my head up against anything at this point in my life. I feel like I'm done with the banging.
You're safe now. You're safe.
I mean, I feel like it. So
Yeah.
now we're just even thinking about, like the younger generation and like,
Yeah.
these younger kids and kind of the things that we can do to help them out to at least give them a better step moving forward. It's like, wow, like if we have something like this and these sort of things start to present themselves, then hey, we're gonna have to take a little bit of a break. And we're
That's
gonna make
right.
sure that this is, and like you said, like reach out to the right people, get with a speech therapist, things like that. Because I'm sure if somebody was off and you came in to meet with them, you could know within 5-10 seconds after asking them a couple questions
Yeah.
if they were technically 100% or not. And
Yeah.
that's what, like, I think as parents, that's really where my mind is going right now. It's like, wow, we really need to protect what's under our roof, and we
Yeah.
really need to give our kids,
All
that,
those signs.
yes, like just give them the proper way to move forward, because nobody's making a team at 8 years old. Okay, like I'm an evaluator, right? I'm an evaluator of talent for the New York Yankees, and no, I'm not looking at 8-year-olds. Like I'm just that's not what I'm doing. I'm
No
waiting
rookie
until
of
you're
the
like,
year.
that's what I'm saying. I'm waiting until you're 15, 16, 17, 18. Then I'm looking at you. You know what I'm saying? So like, I always focus so much on just the overall fundamentals of whatever sport you're playing. But there's a lot of parents out there that are pushing kids to do something at 6, 7, 8 years old. And I think it's obviously, and the numbers will probably show, right? It's not really helping them moving towards the future, right? They're not getting to their physical, their physical peak. They're not getting to their mental peak. And, for myself, like, listen, I was never the best player on any of my teams when I was a kid. But as I started to progress up the ladder, then I started to get good. Then all of a sudden, 17, 18 years old, I was right where I needed to be. And that's kind of what I try and tell parents is like, I could really care less how good your kid is at 7 or 8 years old. I really don't care. I don't even know what this kid's gonna be in 5 years. Like he hasn't ran into all the bad things that happen, like in sports and the whole nine. They haven't reached that stuff. So just the fact that we could give them a better path moving forward, or a safer path, or at least a better path from when it comes to dealing with injuries, instead of like, hey, rub some dirt on it and get back in there.
Yes.
That's
Or they just
I'm
have
not sure that's the best way to go about it these days.
Yes. But also, luckily, with young brains, so our brains have something called neuroplasticity, and that is the brain's ability to heal itself. So the older we get, the more that neuroplasticity wanes. But as we're younger, you hear about babies who may have like fallen out of a window or taken, a fall of
Right.
some sort, and they're fine. That's because they have very, very, very new neuroplasticity, and so it's likely not an issue. So even one, ding is likely not life threatening, but still having this information is important. But it's those repeated hits that it's very important to take a look at. So we'll finish.
And from what I'm learning even more now is when those things happen, like the amount of time, if they're one after another, that's what we're talking about here. That's where we're like, yo, this can't be happening. If there is a ding, there needs to be a good amount of time before that next ding takes place, because if not, I mean, just what you were saying, the SIS,
Yeah,
the overall the TBIs, like those start to kind of
build. And that's
those
when you start seeing those black spots in the brain. Yes. And even when I talk to coaches, they like I just did a talk at a university here in Charlotte, and I did a kind of a preface, so I let the coach see a couple of the slides, and I like to ask before I get started. I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence. How much experience do you have with it? And he was very confident. He was like, I've been a coach for, over a decade. I'm very well familiar with concussion. Like, let's get into it. The second slide, it was on SIS, and he was like, I've never heard of this.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Even for myself, I was like, yo, I felt like I had a decent understanding, like a decent knowledge of this topic. But now I'm like, yo, I don't know shit, dude, about like what's going on. It's the truth. But once again, it's like, if I don't know anything about this, and I've been an athlete, I'm 40, I turned 44 this year. I've been an athlete for over half of my life. Like, if I don't know about this sort of stuff, then I'm thinking to myself, like, how does anybody know about this stuff unless they've dealt with it and they had to deal with it and they had to speak to somebody, to figure out what was going on with themselves or their kid or their spouse or something like that. So now I'm like, wait a minute.
A lot of people are suffering in silence.
There's so much. But once again, I also think too, I'm either, I'm a girl dad, and there's some things that you have to do as a girl dad that you might not have done as a meathead dad before in your life. And so like now I'm just like learning all these different things. So with now all this sort of knowledge, I'm like, wow, like there's so many things that we think we might know about, but I can promise you that we probably don't know as much about that topic as we should.
Right.
And I also think as the male, we don't need to be tough guys. That sometimes the toughest guys in the world are the ones that can admit something's wrong. Yeah. And I think that's kind of one of those things that, at least for myself, I learned from somebody early in my career. Jason Kendall was like, hey man, Swish, the toughest guys in the world are the guys that can walk away from the fight. And so now it's just kind of like, wow, like we don't have to be the tough guys anymore, man. Like being a tough guy is not what it used to be. Being a tough guy now is being educated and understand like what's going on with your body or with a body of someone to be able to try and help them so they don't have to worry about those permanent losses that you talked about from the SISs and the multiple concussions in back-to-back short amount of times. Like I never even thought about that. I just thought a concussion was a concussion and it just did damage itself. Now you're like, wait a minute, if you get back-to-back concussions in a short amount of time, that's like quadruple the damage that you could do from just one concussion. So now I'm just like, wow, like the young kids, young athletes, seasoned athletes, like this stuff it's crucial, and it makes so much sense when you actually sit down and you're not scared about what's happening. Maybe it's easier for me to look at these sort of things because my career is over and I'm not worried about those things happening to me, because I was a kamikaze when I was playing. I mean, I would dive into anything. I would, run into anything. It's just the type of player that I was. I played with, like, my hair was on fire. I don't think that this sort of information would change that style of play, but it would definitely make the comeback a lot better, or the time off might be a little different. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. From taking a couple extra weeks off to get your mind right and your brain right, so that you don't have to worry about those, those permanent damages that could happen later. I don't want to be one of those guys on that sheet with 6 dudes right there. I don't want to be one of those guys on there. And there's ways to not be on there. It's just you have to be educated and you have to understand that it's going to take a little time to get back. So
there are also cognitive exercises. So when I say the map of the brain, so that I get my answers as where you're having your deficits, but then I get to come up with an entire treatment plan on how to exercise and rehab that back for you. So there are even exercises to incorporate the physical. So if you have, 3 or 4 of the colored cones, then each cone can be a category. This one is food, this one's sports, this one is vacation spots. But you have to remember each of the categories, and then I'm going to point to one. You have to remember, okay, if this one's food, all right, pizza. Then I point to this one. This one's sports, okay, baseball. And then if I point to this one again, you can't repeat baseball and you can't repeat pizza, but you have to remember the categories. And then what was this last one over here? So that's a lot of cognitive load and exercise that is done, but you get to incorporate the physical, because if you're doing drills and having to remember that, then you're working all of those parts of the brain. But I don't know if exercises like that are incorporated into drills and things like that when you're on the field.
I think we focus so much on the physical side. Yes. That you don't really, I even talk about, tracking, eye tracking, things like that. Like your eyes are muscles too. And so for someone like me, I had to try and get everything better because my physical stature wasn't enough for me. So I had to make sure my eyes were better. And I did a lot of tracking stuff and I preached that sort of stuff. I think that, being able to make yourself strong throughout your entire body is the name of the game, not just being a physical guy who can bench press 400 pounds. Well, I need to be able to jump. I need to be able to throw. I need to be able to read a pitch. I need to be able to have the understanding of what's going on in the game. All that stuff makes you strong, not just being a physical person in just one sense. I'm just like, wow, there's just so much information where I'm just like, okay, there's some things that like people need to get better at. And there's things that like, that we can. It's just getting this sort of information out to the proper channels and getting people to understand and to sit down and to take the hot second to be like, wow, I really can avoid these things if I'm doing them the proper way. The concussions, I would say sometimes it's hard to avoid those. Sometimes it is. But if I do get the concussion, then I have to understand that I have to take the time off so that I'm going to be okay if something like that may happen again. And
Right.
that's where I'm like, wow, that stuff makes so much sense to me, especially as young kids, because I'm sure Pop Warner, playing, young hockey, soccer, at least for myself, you would think soccer would be the non-contact sport, but that's where, jumping up for headers, the whole nine. I mean, like, I played soccer up until I was 13. So I'm like, I got a pretty good understanding of how that goes too.
Yeah, I
So
mean, you played a lot of sports and then you chose baseball. What made you choose baseball?
that's it. I went on my first recruiting trip, West Virginia. And I remember being in the locker room after the game, and these dudes are taking their shoulder pads off, and they're looking like full-size avatars walking around. And I was just like, man, this baseball thing is looking real good right now, dude. Like, I don't want that guy to hit me, and I don't want to have to hit that guy, and this is
Okay.
not for me. But I don't know. I mean, I'm 44, about to turn 44. Like, when we were growing up, it was like whatever the season was, that was the sport that you played. There was no specialized sports. And now because of these pay-to-play models like Perfect Game and things like that, that these parents feel like they have to be at every tournament, because if not, they're going to miss out on something. And but once again, that's why we're seeing a lot of injuries, cumulative injuries in the elbow and shoulder over time. And that's how those things happen. And these are kind of the same things we're talking about. These are injuries that happen over time that you just don't take care of properly. And at the end of the day, it's going to physically hurt you for life. It's permanently going to damage the thing that's keeping you alive and helping you make decisions. And that's your brain.
Yes.
Like, that's the most important thing we got, is our brain and our spine. And then like everything else is just good after that. But if you don't take care of those sort of things,
you got it.
Hey, Doc, I'm learning. You're teaching me stuff. You're teaching me stuff.
Yes.
I think that there's a lot of information to be learned. And even from this short conversation that you and I have had today, sort of putting these things on my radar, just like, wow, I didn't even know these were the sort of things that could happen. And I never even thought that back-to-back concussions would be worse than having one concussion. And now, from all the data points that you have, the markers, all that stuff, like, you're learning. You've seen more brains than I'll ever see. That's a fact. So being able to have somebody like you that is giving up her life to help athletes like myself, or younger athletes, or anybody in this sort of sports world, like, I think it's fantastic. Kudos to you, Doc. Like, it's people like you that we need to make this place a better spot, because at the end of the day, like, it's not easy to listen to these things. It's not easy to hear about the things that can happen. But once again, like, hey, listen, I always said, sometimes the getting injured is one thing, but taking care of it is a whole nother.
Yeah.
It's like my daughter, she banged her elbow. She was roller skating in the house, shocker, and she landed on something and really, banged her elbow up. And I was just like, yo, mama, hey, sometimes, the injury is a lot less worse than the treatment. So, hey, I got her in the ice bucket, the whole nine. She don't like it. But at the end of the day, I'm like, yo,
Major League Dad.
That's it, dude. Like, hey, I'm going to get you healthy, girl. I'm going to put this thing on ice, 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off. Let's get this,
20 minutes on. The whole nine. I love it.
So I'm just trying to do my best to try and give my daughters the best path moving forward. And this is one of those things where now, I mean, I'm around a lot of younger athletes now. And I feel like I'm a mentor to, a lot of young athletes, a lot in obviously the baseball world. But obviously, just from kids that I've met throughout the years and the whole nine that may play different sports, these are sort of those things that, now when a parent calls, says, hey, Swish, man, I need your help, man. Joe got into it, he banged heads with somebody on the soccer field the other day, and he's really kind of out of it, and the whole nine of it. Hey, man, call a speech therapist, bro. Like, get on the doctors, right? Like, they'll take care of you. They'll let you know everything you need to know, because I think as parents, that's kind of the hardest thing for us to come to grips with. We don't have all the answers. And sometimes it's hard for us to go out and get help. And sometimes it's hard, at least as a man, to ask for help.
Yeah.
So I think that we get in these situations now where it's like, hey, we have information and we have the blueprint of how you sort of handle these sort of injuries, because it's not a permanent injury until you make it one. And that's where it's kind of like, hey, we got to continue to we got to stay on top of this stuff, make sure our kids are in the right spot, whether you're a young kid, middle kid, older kid, all this sort of stuff really, really makes a lot of sense. And I'm like, wow, I mean, I'm stoked. I'm juiced that I got all this information in there, because now I'm like, oh damn, man, I help some people out down the road here,
Got
and if not,
tip of the iceberg, and just a little bit of information.
just a little bit. And if not, I'm just going to send them straight to you. I'll be like, yo, you got to call my girl, Dr. Kelly. You got to call her up, man.
Send them my way.
She knows.
I want as many people to hear this information as possible. If you have the time, I want to ask a couple of questions.
Sure.
I would like to know what information or education, if any, were you provided when you were an athlete, from youth to professional?
Not a whole lot as a youth. I'm just trying to think. I mean, growing up in the 80s and 90s, that wasn't really a big thing. I think over the last handful of years, maybe over the last decade, really started to learn a little bit more about head injuries, CTE, what sort of things those can cause. But obviously in the baseball world, you don't hear a whole lot about that. You hear it through the football world, or you hear it through the hockey world or something like that. There's not a whole lot of head banging in baseball. So it's really not one of those things where I don't think it's at the forefront of the information that we're given. So I learned very little as a child. Obviously now, being a grown up, being an adult, being a father, I'm learning a lot more because I think now we're starting to realize that athletes aren't superhuman. And sometimes that, you need a little extra help. And whether that's on the depression side or, listen, there's a lot of pressure being a professional athlete. I think I saw a stat the other day. It was like 0.02946% of all athletes make it to the professional level, something crazy like that. And so it's like, if you are at that level, then you've been doing this for a minute. So for myself, just being able to get the information that like someone like you is giving me now is only going to help myself move into the future.
Yeah, wow. 0.4. That's interesting.
I see that sort of stuff happening. And I'm sure a lot of other people out there in the world are seeing that sort of stuff too.
Yeah.
They just maybe don't know what to do, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, even for myself, just getting that information, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm like, that's why I'm like, you came into my life for a reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just to like have like a better understanding of how these things manifest themselves, or how you can make them better, or how you can at least combat them a little bit, because I find it very hard that just you're going to have to live with this. I don't believe in that. I feel like you can always get better with something of some sort of way you're doing it. And so it's like, maybe it's like, for me, it's like getting back to the, for me, it's like just getting back to the basics a little bit, learning a little more on what things that we can do to combat this sort of stuff. But I also look at my father, from him, like maybe this sort of stuff might happen in my life too. So then now the supplements and the things that I take at 44 years old are way different than what they were 24.
Yes.
But I think to myself, like, I'm just learning more, and I'm educating myself, and I'm reading more, and I'm trying to learn as much as I can about how my body works. I just want to make sure that I am best and giving myself the best. Because like I said, if I'm going to live to be 120, Doc, I mean, I feel like I'm going to have to go through some shit in my life,
As I tell people, today's 50 is not yesterday's 50. Today's 40, not yesterday's 40. And I look at the pictures and it's like, they were my age.
I know, right? And I remember my dad was 40. I'm like, Claire, you're old, man. You look old.
Exactly. Okay, a couple more questions, and then I'm going to let you go. Do you have a clear understanding of the risks?
No.
Okay.
You don't really, I guess that's never really comes into play as an athlete. I guess you never really know like what the end result will be. It's just kind of like the old saying is the price of doing.
Yeah.
And it just really is what it was. And maybe that was in the early 2000s for me, the whole nine. But now we're in the 2020s, and it's like, wow, the information we're getting is so much more now. Maybe because of all this, we'll be able to keep our athletes on the field a little longer. The longevity of an athlete might be a lot longer than what it was in the 70s, 80s, or 90s. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. I wouldn't want to ever try and rip somebody off the field or tell them not to play sport. That's like the worst thing you would want to tell somebody.
Tell them to be safer. Be safe.
Exactly. Just a little bit safer and a little bit better with how you're going to treat an issue. I think for myself, a strained forearm is treated a lot differently now in 2024 than it was in 2000, or even in 2010. Just the overall technology is so much better. And so I think for myself, like injuries, that's one of the things that I still think we can do a way better job on when it comes to that, because obviously a brain injury takes time to heal. And that's one thing that athletes don't really have a whole lot of is time. It's such a short amount of time that you get to do this. And so that's where it's kind of like, hey, listen, I mean, that's where it's like, just listening to what you're saying, like, that's where we have to take the game. That's where we have to start letting these athletes know moving forward that, hey, if we do have a brain injury like this, then we have to time to get it better so we don't worry about those permanent things that are going to happen later in life.
Yes. And a big thing that I'm finding is that with athletes, they really need that buy-in from coaches so that they vulnerability and trust, because athletes want to make their coaches proud. They're afraid of losing their spot. And so with educating coaches, letting them say, take that time, your brain comes first, your spot is going to be here. And I think if athletes have that comfort of, I'm safe, I don't have to worry about being replaced, then they can feel better in that time.
No doubt. And that's such a hard thing because the world is just so competitive now.
I do.
Exactly. And it's like one of those things where you're like, all right, sure, I'd love to say that like your spot's going to be back here in 6 weeks when you're ready, but at the end of the day, and it really is, it's like, you feel like you're always trying to look for the next best thing, and rather than saying like, hey man, I love what we've got here. At the end of the day, like, hey, it may take a little time for this player to get back, but we know if we do what's right, that he'll be back and better than ever. I think that's, like you're saying, I mean, it might be easier to do that at certain levels. I
but just at least providing the knowledge and education and then seeing what can be done with it.
No doubt, no doubt. I think that's the one thing. It's just having the knowledge of how to go about getting yourself back on the field. I think is one thing athletes really need to understand. Like, hey, if this happens, then I need to do A, B, C, and D to get myself back. And until I can complete D, then I can't get on the field. If I'm stuck A, B, and C, and I still can't get D down, then I still got to take a little time off to get my mind back. Because literally, if you don't, you're not going to be around this world to enjoy and reap the benefits of what you were able to accomplish on the field anyways.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so you did not have like concussions that really impacted daily life per se, would you say? Like when you hit the wall?
No. I can definitely say that's, I don't, at least I don't feel like it's affected it permanently moving forward. But I also thought I did a pretty good job of, taking a little bit of time off to get my mind and my brain, right where it needed to be.
Was there anything like sensitivity to light? You said you felt nauseous.
Yeah, I just remember when I ran into the wall and it was more of a whiplash. It was more of a kind of like a real whip like this, and I just remember falling back and everything went black, and everything just I couldn't see anything. And then all of a sudden, like 2 seconds later, I rolled over and I just saw the baseball, and I just grabbed the baseball and tried to throw it in. And then from that point, I just felt like I was just going to throw up everywhere.
Did you actually throw it to where it needed to go?
Yeah, so I just kind of just chucked it back into the closest person that I could find, and then from there everything kind of like I was like, all right, I know where I'm at. I didn't feel like I lost consciousness for a hot minute, and then I know that everything kind of came back from there, and then it just felt like I just felt like it's just queasy, nauseous, and then I just remember going in, just laying down, and I remember sweating profusely. Just because I remember like my body was just like, I don't know what's happening right now, but it's freaking out. And, then when I got back in, then when everything started to calm down a little bit more, when I started to kind of breathe a little bit better and kind of get all my breathing back, then everything felt a little better. But that was 2004. So I mean, we're talking 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That was the last time that I, kind of like banged into something, lost consciousness, and felt like it was like what a concussion would feel like.
But tough athlete, you finished the game.
Hey, no. I finished the play, and then I was
Finished the
taken
play.
immediately out of the game.
Okay. When you had the whiplash, did you hit your head on anything, or was just the actual sensation of that
So
whip?
it was a ball over. So say this was the wall, and I was running to catch the ball here, and I mistimed my steps.
Uh-huh.
And when I came through, I think I might have hit, and then came back this way, and then
Okay.
everything just went dark from
Wow.
that point.
Wow.
And I didn't. And the worst part about it was one of my really good buddies that hit the ball, and so I
Oh,
was going after it a little extra hard, because I was like, no way, this dude's getting a hit on me, no way.
that good
So
old competition.
that's it, dude. It'll take you to that next level for sure.
Okay. Okay, last couple questions. Um, knowing what you know now, is there anything that have changed or done differently?
I would have immediately, right out of the gates, I would have hired obviously learning from what you're talking about, because I think that's kind of one of the things that when you're thinking to yourself, it's easy because it's all thoughts. Like nothing really coming out of your mouth. It's just thinking about what's happening. But when you're with a speech therapist, from what I've learned today, is, yo, there are some questions that I need you to answer. And if you can't answer them, then obviously that immediately tells us where we're at.
Yeah.
Because like, instead of guessing where your body and your brain is at, why would we want to do that? Just have the understanding, like know where you're at, like know where you are at that moment, so then we can combat that with whatever we need to do. Because for myself, I was just kind of guessing. I was just like, okay, and thank goodness that I had another injury that I had to take the time off to give my brain the time that it needed to heal up to get myself back on the field.
Yeah.
Because I felt like maybe if I wouldn't have had that shoulder injury, that I would have been back on the field as soon as I could have.
Yeah.
That could have been really bad. And
Yeah.
that's like actually like looking back on it all and understanding what an SIS is and what a TBI is and how 3 concussions equal that TBI, but 2 concussions back to back are the SIS. And that right there is that scares the shit out of me, is because like if you know, because I knew exactly what happened when it happened. I said, this is a concussion. I knew it. I had one in high school football, and I knew exactly what that one felt like as well. And so
Wow.
I just remember just like, wow, okay, I know what's happening to my body. Like, I understand that, but just somebody get me off the field before I throw up in front of thousands of people. Like,
Don't
that's
embarrass
really
myself.
just get me out of here. But being able to take that necessary time off, I think was crucial. But one thing that I would have done is that was when we didn't hire and I didn't talk to was a speech therapist. I didn't talk to anybody like that.
Yeah.
It was just kind of come in, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to give you a week off, and then we're going to kind of go from there. And I don't ever really remember doing any like crazy tests coming back, or like, like you're saying with the cones and being able to, put my stuff in each cone and, recall and the whole nine. I don't remember doing any of that sort of stuff. So I guess I was just really blessed now, like talking to you 20 years later. Like I was lucky that I got to take that time off. And I was lucky that my body and my brain got to heal itself so that I was ready to come back. Because if not, I mean, who would have known? Like I would have gone after that same ball the next night. That's just the way I played. It was the way I got to the big leagues. I wasn't going to stop playing the way that got me there. And so that's where it's kind of like, wow, man, like, divine intervention, man. Like somebody must have been looking out for me at that moment, because like looking back on that, this is that permanent damage is so scary to me.
Yeah.
And having the understanding of what the brain can do and what sort of things and how debilitating it can be, or how it can really help push you forward. I guess I was just really lucky that that sort of stuff kind of like came into play when it did.
I'm glad that you were. Yeah.
Lucky, dude. Lucky.
Very lucky. So that you can be a great husband and father and
I'm trying, Doc. I'm trying.
Yeah. Okay, last thing. What advice would you give to young baseball players about their brain health and the sport?
You got to learn about yourself. You got to learn about, how to deal with these sort of things. I feel like injuries are all part of the game, and it really is. And I think this is kind of one of those things where, I mean, this is an injury as well. And that's one of the things that you just don't hear a whole lot about, because in baseball, it's Tommy Johns and it's shoulders and it's ACLs and things like that. You don't ever hear about the brain trauma that happens. And so I think for myself is get the information. learn, talk to people. If you don't know anything about it, then open up your computer and start reading into it. I think that's the problem. With knowledge comes power, and being able to have all that knowledge and all that strength is only going to help you become a better baseball player moving forward, because you're going to know how your body works, you're going to know how your brain functions, and you're also going to know, hey, if I have some sort of a traumatic injury or some sort of incident, then at least I know how to combat it moving forward. And I felt like for myself, if it's not as scary if you can talk about it. And the more you can talk about issues like this, they don't sound as scary to me, because I'm like, oh, okay. So if I got a concussion, which it's probably going to happen, then okay, then I need to do A, B, C, and D to make sure I get back on the field. And I think that's kind of one of the things where young athletes need to understand, like, you're not making the team tomorrow. You're not making the team at 10 years old. You're not making the New York Yankees at 12 years old. You're constantly learning on how to get yourself better to prepare at the next level ahead of you. And if you know how to handle your body, and if you know how to handle your mind, it's only going to make you the best version of an athlete as well as a human being that you can be. Because listen, I love trying to get my guys to the next level and play in the big leagues, but that's not my ultimate goal. My ultimate goal is to make these individuals bad human beings and be a great light in this world. Because listen, I know how hard it is to get to the big leagues, and I know how many people have fallen along the waysides along the way. So for someone like me, it's bigger than that. I played baseball. I retired at 33 years old. Like, come on, like 33 years old, you're a puppy at 33. So now it's like, what are you going to do now? Like, what are you going to do now? And so it's kind of like, if I didn't take care of my body, and if I didn't take care of the body the way that I am now, then I'm not going to be able to do all these amazing things. And I think I'm going to be able to make a huge impact on later in life, because it's not always in the now. And I think athletes look at that. So it's like, it's such a narrow mindset. It's like, I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to do this. It's not. It's a slow grind. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. And I think if young athletes understood that moving forward, it would be better for them.
I love that. It's not always in the now.
It's not always in the now. No, it's not. And like, even looking back for myself, like, dude, like my life right now is better than any part of my life that I've ever had earlier. Are you kidding me, dude? I got a beautiful wife I wake up to. I got 2 beautiful daughters that look at me like I'm the world. Like, I'm like, dude, like all that is the reason why you play sports, is because it's afterwards. It's all that stuff after. Sure, people are going to remember you. People are going to not remember you, but that's not the deal. The deal is making sure that you're able to live your life to the fullest for however long that you want to do it. And so for me, I made my mind up a long time ago. I was going to do this until I'm 120. And then from there, we'll just rock it out. Because whether that happens or not, I think it's a mindset of how you want to go about living your life. And if you have that mindset of how you're going to take care of your body, you're going to treat it like the temple that it is, I think at the end of the day, it's going to benefit everybody.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing else to say with that. Mic drop worthy. Thank you so much.
You got it, Doc. This is amazing. I love the fact that we connected right here. I think this is so great. Like I said, if there's, obviously anything I can help moving forward. And I know for me, man, hey, that gerbil's running in here. So I already got a bunch of things that I'm thinking about right now.
Well, if you can, again, like I need a mic and an audience. So if you know anybody who needs this information or a room that I can get in to share it, I'm happy to do that. My goal is to just have people to know this so that they can be inspired like you and think better, do better, because that is what's needed, because that's what's lacking.
I agree, Doc. I appreciate you taking time to chat with me this morning. Thank you so much. This stuff is amazing. I love this. I'm gonna hit you up on Instagram for sure.
Okay.
Definitely want to keep in touch for sure, because I know there's going to be some things that are going to pop up. And I'm going to be like,
absolutely.
Doc, I don't know about this or this, and you can put me back on the right path. I'm so happy to connect with you. Have an awesome rest of your day, and then I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
All right, you too. See you.
Thank you for tuning in to Kandid Konversations with Dr. Kelly. I hope today's discussion left you inspired, informed, and ready to take on your next challenge with a clearer mind. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep striving for a healthier mind and a happier life. I'm Dr. Kelly, and this has been another Kandid Konversation.